we're going to get started. And just before we start, so talk is Forward Thinking, Alternative Economies of Production. My name's Laura, and I produce a Feast journal, which has been working with Hospitalfield on today's event. But before I start, I just have to say a few things for everyone's safety. So don't move the seats. They've been set up to be 2 meters apart to keep distance, both for the speakers and for the audience. This talk is being live streamed. It's being streamed to Hospitalfield's YouTube channel, so that means any questions you will ask will be audio recorded and heard through the live stream. If you have a question, I know it might feel slightly awkward, but could you please walk up to the microphone? Don't touch the microphone. Just walk up to it and say your question into the mic so that no one has to project their voice or shout. And also we can then capture what you're saying for the live recording. And we're going to talk for maybe an hour, well, maybe 45 minutes, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions. And the talk, as well as the earlier talk, are going to be available to watch again via Hospitalfield's website. So we've just heard from Rowan Marshall, and sort of didn't hear, but did in the end a little bit, from Heidi Saxby about her research, talking about the soft fruit industry here in Angus and the traditions of picking alongside some of the challenges and practicalities of having a migrant seasonal workforce. Now, obviously, there's huge changes and challenges currently taking place in relation to the freedom of movement across borders, both from the impact of COVID and also our exit from the European Union, and how that impacts upon farming and structures of migrant labour. And I suppose those questions around labour and the challenges around creating a sustainable workforce are part of the much wider economy of farming. So the economy of people, the growing environment, and the market, and how they all play a vital role. And obviously innovation is essential to the future of farming, and great ideas and ingenious approaches to making them work economically is the lifeblood of food production. So in thinking of the future and how to continue to produce food by economically viable means, the talk now will discuss alternatives to large-scale industrial farming, looking at regenerative and sustainable models of growing, including community-supported agriculture initiatives, also known as CSAs, and locally focused distribution networks, both of which are emerging as really viable alternatives to the established economies of industrial farming. So we're going to hear from Gillian McEwen, here, of Lunham Bay Farms, which was formerly Mearside Farms Produce. Based at Lunham Bay, Gillian ethically produces free-range goat meat, asparagus and honeyberries in a sustainable and regenerative agricultural model. Joining Gillian is Tom from East Neuk Market Garden. East Neuk are a 2-acre small-scale agroecological farm growing over 50 varieties of vegetables, salads, herbs and fruit. And they grow on a human scale without the use of pesticides, herbicides or chemical fertilizers, following methods that enrich and regenerate biodiversity and soil fertility. They currently have a 40-member CSA and sort of have grown the model of the market garden from their ethos that everyone should have access to local, sustainably produced food that enhances the wider ecosystem. Kirsty Black from Arbiki Highland Estate is going to facilitate the discussion. So Kirsty is both distiller and manager at Arbiki, which was, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, But Abiki was founded with the ambition to be like the most sustainable distillery in the world. And they produce vodka, gin and whiskey using only ingredients planted, sown and grown and harvested within an arm's length of the distillery. So Kirsty's knowledge of distilling and growing informs the approach at Abiki, and she's been part of the team since its conception in 2014, overseeing all aspects of its conversion from a disused cattle shed into the multi-award-winning farm-to-bottle distillery that it now is. So I'll hand you over to Kirsty. And we'll have some questions at the end.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Is this working? Is this on? Yeah, sorry. So as Laura said, I work for a distillery called Arbiki. So it's just located halfway between Arbroath and Montrose on the coast, overlooking Inverkeeler and Lunan Bay, if you're from this area. So as Laura said, we're a farm-to-bottle distillery. So everything that we take into the distillery is grown on the farm, whether that be potatoes, wheat, barley, rye, and more recently peas, which I'll talk about in a little second. As well as all the farm crops, however, we've, over the last 6 years now, planted thousands of juniper plants. We've put in native hedgerows of native flowers and fruiting species, and now we have a polytunnel where we're trying to grow the more exotic plants that we use to flavour our spirits. So all of this is really trying to, although we are a big farm, unlike Tom, we're trying to help our sustainability and reduce our production and food miles on site. This year, however, we decided to take it one step further. So in February, we launched a range of products made out of peas. So peas are a more environmentally friendly crop to grow. Unlike most cereals and things we talk about, they don't need man-made synthetic fertilizers. They can take this naturally from the air. So by distilling them and turning them into spirits, we've released these under a climate-positive brand called Nadar, which is Gaelic for nature. And then the other piece of this is that we only use one part of the pea, it's the starch. The protein is in a co-product, which we then go on to feed to animals, which again in turn reduces how much protein, such as soy protein, that we have to import. So we're again helping the environmental footprint there. So we're not here to talk about me or peas. If there's any questions, they're welcome. Not about me, peas. We're here to talk about these two great producers here. So as I said, at Arbiki, we're adapting. Despite being a large farm, we're adapting our farming practices, our rotations, and trying to start embracing regenerative farming and sustainable models. So when we use these terms, they often focus on soil, rebuilding soils, strengthening agricultural resistance and biodiversity. So it's kind of moving away from the traditional farming models of food production and maximizing yields. So I guess we can start maybe with you, Tom, on what the terms regenerative farming or sustainable farming mean to you and your business model.
Sure, thanks. Oh, is this on? There you go. Thanks. Yes. Well, yeah, like we said, we're a 2-acre small market garden, and obviously we're at a completely different scale to you guys, which makes some things easier and some things more difficult. For us, we grow a big range of vegetables. We've been growing only in one polytunnel up until now, and now we're expanding that. But to be regenerative agriculture and sustainable agriculture to us means, I suppose, a range of things. We, as well as dedicating even just our tiny area of 2 acres to growing vegetables, we've also planted, as well as a native hedge row that's around our plots, we've also then put in like mini meadow strips and trees and willow and things like that to break up the space. We're in a very exposed site, only about 500 meters from the sea, not dissimilar to here really, and we get southwesterlies blowing across us very strongly all year. Lots of recognition. So we've done a lot at the start before we even planted any crops to try and start creating a space that allows you to grow vegetables as much of the year as possible. So that's a big part of it, I think, is about trying to change and maintain the landscape, even in a tiny scale like ours, in a way that's positive, but also is net positive to the to wildlife and to the ecology as well as the farm business. So that's a big part of it for us, and we've already seen a difference since we've done that in terms of the amount of birds and stuff that come into the plot compared to sort of the arable fields around us. So that's really important to us. And I suppose something often that gets in the regenerative model is reducing tillage and reducing soil disturbance, and that's something we are experimenting with. We're not completely zealots about like no dig methods, which basically means stopping all machinery from inverting or disturbing the soil. We have areas of the farm that we're doing that. Two blocks of our rotation that are now in like a deep mulch, which we just add compost on top of the soil and grow through that. And because we were doing that in our polytunnel because we didn't want to drive tractor in and out of a polytunnel. And it was one of those things where we saw the benefit of it in the tunnel, but we were still we were primarily rotivating outside, and we could see the benefit in the tunnel of the soil health and the sort of soil activity. So we kind of decided to expand that, and there's a lot of benefits to that in theory about carbon sinking, and soil water retention in the soil. And it does reduce weeding and some of the more tedious jobs like that on a market garden when you're doing most things by hand. So, but it relies on quite a lot of importing of compost at the moment for us. So there's an argument to talk about there about how sustainable is that to be importing so much fertility and just mulch basically. And I'm even more conscious of it now because there's been some reports recently about microplastics in soil, and we're using green waste compost. Not only green waste compost, but we do use that, and that has been shown to have, well, you just don't know what's in it, and so that there's the risk that if plastic is being incorporated into composting systems, then you're getting microplastics into your soil and then into the plants. So that's something that's made us stop and think just in the last week. We saw I think it was in Nature and a couple of other scientific journals at the same time, and it was just about just refocused our attention on having to close the loop in terms of producing our own compost, which we'd like to do from like wood chip compost from the willow strips that we have in the farm to make ramial wood chip compost. But we need to do more to close that loop, maybe have chickens and other things just to try and do that. So yeah, I think for me, when you talk about regenerative, those are the two main things, I suppose, is soil building, soil protection and wildlife enhancement.
And do you find do you use these sort of terminologies when you're selling your produce? I know we've spoken ahead about organic, and you've chosen not so far to use that or get that certification. And do you find consumers understand these terms, and are they useful?
Probably, maybe, unless someone's really, really, really interested. They haven't heard regenerative agriculture. Maybe if they've gone on YouTube and some of the big YouTube market gardeners and farmers use that term, they might have heard of it, but it's not something that I don't get a spark of recognition when you say it to someone. But so we're forced to say that we practice organic methods but aren't currently certified organic, which is really long-winded and not a fun thing to say. And that's part of the reason why we're considering moving away from the idea of, because we're a CSA and because we're so local, that self-certification is enough to perhaps going for certification.
Okay. And Gillian, so you're a larger farm than Tom, but how have you still managed to sort of embrace some of these techniques that are coming through now, and how you've seen your farm change, I guess?
Well, in the last 4 years, my husband and I, Neil, sort of diversified to adopt more sustainable approaches on the farm, and these include growing more nutrient-dense products, and also introducing livestock onto the farm. Goats are known as the masters of regeneration because they're very unique livestock in that they have a unique digestive system which they can pull. They are selective browsers, whereas sheep and cattle are grazers, and goats tend to select nutrient-dense weeds. These weeds that are noxious and invasive, like your thistles and your gorse, goats will go and eat these types of plants. And these plants are deep-rooted, so they're bringing up all these trace minerals from the ground, which the goats are then eating. No other animals will eat them, and then they're excreting them back into the ground. So they're natural fertilizers. They have unique mouths in that they have these horny pads which pulverize seeds. So they don't have a row of teeth on the top. They've just got this horny pad which pulverizes the seed, and it means that they don't self-fertilize. So they're clear up the ground, but also they're putting nutrients back in. So things like potassium, potash, nitrogen, they're able to excrete these back into the soil. So we're using them to clear up brush ground on our land, but also we use them for rotational grazing, which is another sustainable process that we've recently started. And the theory behind that is putting animals on short, say an acre or so, for short periods of time, a couple of days. They're not grazing right down to the soil. They're great where there's potentially a lot of parasites. Goats are different in that they have a much lower immunity to parasites than sheep or cattle. So as part of our high welfare management of the goats, we have to really look after their gut biology, their gut health. So the goats are put on to graze for a couple of days at a time, and it can help boost their immunity, and also it's improving our pasture and soil quality. So that was the main reasons why we brought goats onto the farm, is to really regenerate the land. But they've also got the added benefit of producing a very nutritious meat. They're scientifically proven to be the lowest in fat compared to other meats, including chicken and venison. They've got a really good complements of vitamins, really high in iron. So, and also the goats have a low carbon footprint. So it's a very kind of eco-friendly nutrient source. So that's the goat side of it. The asparagus we introduced into the farm 3 years ago, and what it's helped us do is create a new habitats on the farm for various biodiversity. So it was kind of unexpected because asparagus stays in the ground for up to 10 years. So you're not disturbing the ground that whole time for almost a decade. What we found were lapwings, which are classed as one of the endangered species on the RSPB list, started to come onto the asparagus field when just before we start to harvest. We harvest everything by hand, so there's no disruption of the land, but the lapwings appeared, and they like to nest in low vegetation, so they can sort of see predators flying about. So all these lapwings started to appear, and that got us interested in other sort of projects we could be involved with to help increase biodiversity to the farm. So we got involved with the RSPB, and we're looking at trying to help increase the populations of corn bunting, which has been a small bird. They call him the fat man of the barley because he looks a little bit rotund maybe. So we've adopted various practices to try and increase that bird population, and we're already starting to see that. So we've got multiple projects all sort of towards sustainability and regenerative agriculture on the farm.
And was that, now I'm just thinking, goats and peas together could like make the soil amazing. decided 4 years ago to get goats and then asparagus, was the intention always about, I guess, sustainability, or is that just, well, some of it's been a lucky side effect, I guess, with the birds and things.
Yeah, I mean, it
Was
was
that the driving
to the
force?
yeah, it was. I mean, we wanted to certainly improve the soil, reduce the use of fertilizers as well. So trying to use the goats as natural fertilizers, and yeah, there's been a few sort of offshoots of these projects which have come about completely unexpectedly, like the lapwings, and involved in the whole kind of conservation of birds and increasing bird populations.
To me, I guess community-supported agriculture is all about building strong, close and mutually beneficial relationships. Correct me if I'm wrong, that was always when you started out, you were to be a CSA from the start, is that right? Yeah, Tom. So I guess what made you decide that was your focus on a local market rather than, some companies might sell the Scotland brand further afield and small producers? Why did you decide to go focus local?
I guess it's partly a scale thing, that because it's only 2 acres, we could maybe specialise in some, a few very specific crops. But if we wanted to grow in the way that we were interested in, the CSA model seemed like a good fit. I mean, we sometimes think that maybe 2 acres is still too small even for a true CSA, a truly, single. If we were just a pure CSA and didn't have any other routes to market, then probably we would need a bit more land. So that's some part of our considerations. But it was also just because we wanted to help be part of just a wider movement of relocalizing food systems and food networks as much as we could. And that is a really direct way of doing it. And there's also just from experience that the first farm that we volunteered, we didn't even work at it, in northern France, me and my partner Connie. He was a CSA doing like 80, 90 bags a week for, I think, 11 months of the year, and on an old intensive pig farm that he'd taken over from his dad, and had shrunk the acreage right down to a couple of 2-3 acres. And it was just amazing and really, really inspiring. So that kind of, I guess, in a way, just put us on that path. But yeah, I would say that we started the CSA as well because it's a way of instantly getting a market. You're not having to go out there and find suppliers or wholesalers. You can we really almost did no advertising in the first year. We just have an Instagram and a Facebook page, and did some farmers markets and had a sign-up sheet, and that's all we needed to get people signing up. So it was quite low cost in that sense.
No marketing budget needed.
Yeah.
Okay, and obviously the local communities fully embraced it and supported.
Yeah. I think that why we were happy with when the opportunity for the land that we're renting came up was because it seemed there was a gap there for where we are in the East Nuke. There's a place where people really want to support local businesses of any kind. Really, people really, buy from. There's lots of small businesses, and everybody sort of buys from each other. And we've ended up selling through some fish retail wholesalers and stuff like that. So people are very happy to support and collaborate.
And Julian, can you explain a bit, I guess, how your sale model was and how it's changed in the last few months, I guess, compared to last year to this year? And
yeah, I mean, initially the products that we were developing were predominantly for the wholesale market, working with chefs, especially something as niche as goat meat. You really need to work with the chefs to showcase how that product can be utilised and sort of to slowly get people aware of how versatile it is. So that was our kind of main focus. Obviously, COVID hit this year and the hospitality industry kind of grinded to a halt. So that was about 2 weeks before our asparagus season started. So that was fun because we'd practically sold most of the asparagus on the field to chefs. So it was a case of going out and finding new markets. And luckily, it wasn't really that difficult because there was so many new local food hubs that had set up. There was online, like lots more veg box delivery schemes. Even some of the chef customers that we originally had evolved and offered home delivery services. So we actually we didn't have enough asparagus in the end to supply everybody. There was so much demand through all these retailers and outlets. But yeah, you kind of just have to keep evolving. Like our goat meat as well, that we started the season this week, and a lot of chefs don't want to commit to buying it because they could be closed in a week's time. But the good thing is, because we picked up a lot of new customers in the asparagus season, retail customers, they're now discovered us and following what we're doing, and want to be able to buy the goat meat as well. So you just have to evolve to whatever the market is, if it's retail or wholesale. So
true. And you think now will you keep this wider range of outlets in the future?
Yeah, definitely. And I've been completely surprised by how many local customers wanted to try the goat meat. I always thought it was quite a niche product. We'll need to go further afield. But for example, this week I had deliveries all over Angus. So yeah, I was really pleased about that.
Good. Did COVID-19, did it affect your setup, or?
Yeah, we we're only going into our second season, so it's kind of, we didn't have any precedents to break, but we had our plan was our CSA scheme runs for 25 weeks, like half the year, from June to late November, because we don't buy in anything. So the other half of the year, basically, we do wholesale, so selling to mostly to restaurants and cafes, and that was the plan. And so we filled the field and the tunnels with like spinach and chards and spring greens and funny little herbs and stuff. And then and then COVID happened, and suddenly, we already had a waiting list for this season's normal CSA, and then we had so many inquiries. We sort of just had to sort of close the website and close the forms on the website, which was really encouraging. I think it was true. Like you're saying, like it was true across the country, everywhere. It was so oversubscribed, and people were really looking for local food to get out the supermarkets, I think. So we pivot after it was becoming clear that the lockdown was going to stick around for a while. We pivoted and started to I think at the very end of March we started doing subscription bags again, and people who had, because of with the CSA model, we give people the option of paying for the season up front. And some of our customers from the year before had already done that in sort of February, March. They'd paid. And so because we knew people's incomes and stuff were going to possibly get a bit disrupted, we sort of said, okay, we'll start now in late March, and you can sort of draw down on the payment you've already made until we get back to June or something, and then we'll see again if we can restart it, which was, I think, helpful and encourage people to take it up. But we said from the start that you're going to get chard, you're going to get spring greens, you're going to get spinach, and not many other things. Salad turnips and radishes, and it was pretty limited. And but we learned a lot from that, because before we were focusing on every week pretty much like trying to flip the contents almost completely, like because we just had assumed that people would want variety. But actually people really liked being like, well, I know I'm going to get chard every week, so most people only make about 7 or 10 meals ever anyway. So people are like, okay, I know what I've got. So it worked really well, actually. We then bought in like storage potatoes and the odd sort of storage crops and stuff from an organic wholesaler just to bulk it out. But it was fine, to be honest. It was good. Yeah.
We found as well, when you're selling to the public rather than the chefs, the standards that the chefs dictate to you is so much higher, I found.
Definitely.
The first year we did our asparagus, we were searching the field for these poker straight, thick spears. All had to be uniform, all had to be identical. And it was so labour intensive. We were grading till the early hours of the morning to try and get all these spears and get them delivered to them. Whereas this year we were supplying farm shops and cheesemongers, small independent retailers. We ended up actually selling them what we called our wonky asparagus, you know, the misshapen ones, and people loved it and helped us because it reduced our food waste. And there was even some places that said, we don't want the Class A's, we want the wonkies because it fits them more in line with our ethos. And we said, you know, we're not spending as long grading, so we've not got as much labour costs, and people are happier. It's still a fresh product. And we were like, do we want to go back to the chefs next year? So yeah, it's kind of been a bit of an eye opener.
Yeah, we had the same experience of when things did start to reopen. I was like, oh no, I'm going to. We send out like a list every week to our chefs, like, okay, this is what's coming, what's what we have now, and this is what's happening next week.
Yeah.
And you're always thinking, okay, is this ready now? I want those beets to get to a good. I want full-size beetroots, but I know that the chef's going to want baby beetroots, and I have to sell them to him instead. I could sell them to the customer. So it was having that balancing act. Not having that balancing act for a while was quite nice, actually.
Yeah.
On something like everything. So from what you're saying and what you're talking about is actually this question of adaptability. Sorry, this question of adaptability and being able to adapt. And I just wonder, because you're all from different scale farms, how adapting or being responsive as well to things that happen and being flexible, how that works in each of your different situations and scale farms.
Yeah, you'll definitely be.
It's not my farm, but I guess for us, we've got we've got a minimum area that we'd plant with one crop. It's quite a large area. You know, it has to be able to cope with a combine. It has to be big enough to be worthwhile to take all that out. But then the distillery came into existence because we kind of what you're saying about what people accept is, as everybody knows, supermarkets want perfectly round potatoes, and we had lots of wonky potatoes, which to probably everyone here would look like perfectly acceptable potatoes. So that's what we started using in the distillery. And then they were adding value, and they'd have gone for animal feed or some very low value market by all the same amount of work that went into each one of them to grow. So now I think, as adaptability wise, we as a distillery can take in whatever crops in surplus on the farm that year if it's not quite the grade. So there's very strict grades on what barley maltings and why, but we'll still malt our barley and we can still use it. So we're adding value to all these crops, but we can switch from whatever crop we need to take in different years to try and help the farm. Yeah, I don't know, you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of medium-sized, I would say, but because we've diversified into these different projects, we can be quite adaptable. We've got, you know, lots of different kind of income streams coming off the different products, so we can be adaptable. And if, you know, move, especially when we're working with chefs, if they say to us, you know, there's nobody in Scotland growing this product, would you trial it? Like the honeyberries. You know, we've got a couple of acres and they're trialling them out, and they're predominantly to sell to to chefs for them to start experimenting with. And so we can be adaptable, and we've shown that, you know, we're able to grow random things like asparagus, and you know, if we can adapt to that and be quite flexible. We're not totally stuck rigid.
Yeah, and for us, I suppose, the similar story really, but just on a tiny scale. Like, we were having more than one route to market and having an already existing subscription service, and customers allowed us to, in March and April, say, okay, we can offer you this product now that we weren't going to before, and people were happy to take it. So that helped, and it was in a way fortunate that it was in March, because we could just tinker with our crop plans slightly. So we some of the more chefy things we did less of or none of, and we did more items that will go a bit further in the box scheme. We'll get a few more harvests out of, or last a bit longer over the summer. So that and we could just, you know, with the scale of amount of seeds and things we buy, you can do that quite easily. Although there was a real run on seeds from the kind of companies that we buy from, because everybody was wanting to buy, you know, grow at home, and it was we were lucky in that we bought all our seed in January, so we were pretty resilient in terms of that. But there were some things that we struggled to get hold of. But people like the Seed Cooperative were actually really good at making a distinction between sort of allotmenteers and stuff, and then sort of market gardeners and small scale growers, and sort of prioritising that. So we were able to grow everything we wanted to. So yeah.
Yeah.
I also ask about your sort of research investment into what you're doing, because you know the way you've spoken about the goats, and also the soil and your approach and the peas. It seems like your approach to growing and to farming isn't just. It's not solely about labour and
No.
yield. It's about learning as well, and and growing with your goat.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I think is quite interesting compared to some of the discussion earlier that was so focused on labour and so focused on picking that amount per
True. Yeah.
getting your kilos per day, and the focus being on that, and the huge distribution networks that are part of that,
Yeah.
and just the kind of difference in thinking around like regenerative and sustainable farming, and how that requires perhaps more investment in terms of research.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we've made a conscious decision that yield, despite being a large farm, that yield isn't everything, and we're willing to sacrifice. We're revisiting old varieties which may have more flavour, but you'll get less yield per acre. We're willing to try it. So we make a rye whiskey, and no farms in Scotland grew rye, so we tried growing rye and learnt a lot. We're now in our 4th year of rye, and now we understand a lot better how to grow it than the first year. But yeah, I guess. So that wasn't maybe research, that was learning as we went that time. But for other things like the peas, I've done a lot of work on in a lab situation of researching how to turn them into alcohol. And you've got lots of contacts with goats, obviously, haven't you?
Well, we were lucky enough to stumble upon this world expert in goat breeding who just happened to be living a mile away from us. She was on holiday visiting relatives, and it was just like one of those serendipitous things that we just had to get involved with because it was too good an opportunity. And traditionally farmers aren't that great at sharing knowledge, so if you want to diversify into something new, it's tricky to find the expertise. So we got this great contact, and it ended up we went to visit them in Australia where they live now, and visited lots of different goat breeding farms and dairy goat farms, meat goat farms, cashmere, and it was a lot of work to really get a good understanding of goats and the different uses of them. So, and then it ended up we ran a goat conference where we invited breeders from all over the UK and all over the world. We had people from New Zealand, America come over, and they came to our farm, and we did some kind of pioneering IVF. This was goat IVF with a pioneering surgery. So I think you have to keep on researching and being innovative. And every project, from the asparagus to the goats, the honeyberries, it's been a huge time investment in terms of the research, because ultimately there's going to be a big cost to you commercially. And also, really understanding if there's a market for these products, and not traditionally farmers haven't really sold direct. We've lost that with the supermarkets coming on board, and we didn't want to be dictated to by the supermarkets about price and be at the mercy of what they were willing to pay. So, because I ran a local food hub, I had a lot of connections with chefs and other people in the food industry, so I knew that there was an appetite for people wanting to buy local food direct. So because we've taken that decision not to work with supermarkets and to work direct with chefs and to retailers, it meant it took that pressure away, and we could be a bit more flexible with and look at different products that are a bit more unusual. Like asparagus, we're only one of 3 growers in the whole of Scotland, so you could be a bit bold because you know that there's a market out there for it, and people are really, there's a demand for it, so it takes that pressure off. But yeah, with every project, there's lots and lots of research and field trips and speaking to experts and knowledge exchange. So it's a big undertaking.
And Tom, you've spoken about, you obviously had some inspirational visits to other places.
Yeah. I suppose we're kind of still, I mean, I don't mind novices really, in terms of we're only in our 2nd year and we are still learning all the time, whether that's research and development or if it's just learning how to do it. It's maybe, I suppose it's both, because you need to obviously understand the processes and why things are happening for it to be done well. So we're part of like a sort of informal group of market gardeners in Scotland, which there aren't loads of, but there are a growing number of, and we have little visits and stuff with each other, and field walks, and try and learn from each other and share knowledge and share what's worked, because a lot of in terms of vegetables, most seed is grown either in England or on the continent or further away, so a lot of seed that doesn't have the resilience to or the adaptability to grow in the Scottish climate. So there's a lot of things that you can't take for granted when you're growing here. So picking up on varieties and different methods is something that we are doing all the time. We're definitely, like with the no dig, no till stuff. That's why I would say we're not so like zealots about it. We're interested to see how it works and if it fits with our scale, and that has involved a lot of research, soil health research, and trying to understand more about sort of fungal and bacterial life in the soil, and how to work with those, and to boost crop health, and also like nutrient density and sort of the health of the crops and the health-giving properties of the crops. And Connie, my partner, she works as well part-time for Scotland the Bread, which is an organisation growing heritage and population wheats and other cereals and grains. She's the miller. She basically runs the mill. And so she's kind of exposed to that because Andrew, her boss, Andrew Whitley, is an absolute treasure trove of information and loves the research. But he's also becoming increasingly interested, or has been for a long time actually, in the nutrient properties of different grains. And he's interested in getting one of these, I think, are they called bricks meters? It's about analysing the sugar contents and stuff.
Yeah,
I can never remember. But we hopefully
use them on the honeyberries.
Oh, do you? Oh, really? Yeah. We've got one honeyberry bush as well, actually, but it's not made any berries yet. I don't know how long we're meant to expect.
They're a bit slow.
Yeah.
We've got our honeyberry hedge.
Personal use.
But yeah, so hopefully we'll try and pinch that off him and to understand better how different areas where we cultivate and areas where we don't cultivate, how the the nutrient levels and stuff in the crops are different. I definitely think we're learning more than researching and developing.
What drives you to do this? Is it sustainability, or is it more about returning to a more local food system, or what?
I guess it's both of those things. It's thinking that we would talk about issues to do with the food system, and and like you were saying about the power of the supermarkets and the breaking up of local food networks, and saying sort of lamenting that, but then saying, well, shouldn't you, maybe we could do something that's part of that, and the best way of doing that is growing and trying to growing crops and animals and trying to change it on the ground. So it's kind of, in a way, but this sounds, it's a form of activism in a way, which I come to it from that perspective, and I think Connie does as well. as well as just really liking food and wanting to grow it. Yeah.
I don't know what time it is. Yeah, so I assume everybody in the audience also is interested in food and where it comes from. Does anybody have any questions for us? No questions?
Good, we can go get heat up.
I know.
So you're talking about knowledge sharing, and I just wondered if there are platforms that people can access for that. I know of like podcasts such as Farmerama Radio, and just what other, what things that maybe publicly is out there that people can learn more about what you do as well.
I guess for me, I'm involved a lot, but very much technical research with universities and like the James Hatton Institute, but we're part of European-wide consortiums, and everything we do has to be open access. So, there's a legume project called True, so it's got a website, but it is all quite nitty-gritty, more technical research. I don't know for the more accessible.
I mean, well, we launched our website a few months ago, and it's like pretty content rich because we wanted to like really let people see what goes on behind the scenes and why we're rearing goats, and we try and keep that updated regularly. And we're very active on social media, always sort of sharing the different projects we have on the farm. So yeah, we want to be kind of really transparent and open and show people that there are like really good sustainable alternatives to the industrial farming and factory farming. And, so yeah, just our own sort of personal website and social media pages.
Yeah. There must be websites where people can look for local supplies.
Yeah, there's a great thing that started up during lockdown called Farms to Feed Us, which is a really great resource where it's kind of amazing it didn't exist before. Basically, just a database of farmers that do direct sales, whether it's like a subscription service or more single product direct sales. And I think that they're building that database all the time, and you can, as a farmer or as a customer, just submit someone. So we're in it, and I didn't even know before I knew it existed. And I looked through and was like, someone's
already suggested you.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And then just from following, for us, I mean, it's amazing how much information you can get just from following people on social media. There's some people who are so generous with the amount of information they give, and I mean, even to nerdy things for us about settings on seeders and stuff like that. Some people talk about, which is really good. And then Farmerama is brilliant. We listen to that, and there's a podcast called Farm Gate, which is sort of like farm industry discussions, which is really interesting. And there's a guy in America it is quite technical, but it is reasonably accessible, called Regenerative Agriculture Podcast or something like that. Which is a guy called John Kemp, who's like a agronomist, sort of farm advisor, and he talks to sort of soil scientists and people, mostly like in the Midwest. It's a lot of people. It's weird because they're talking about wheat and soybeans and stuff a lot, but it's really interesting because they have that. It's kind of for the public but quite technical, so it's quite interesting. And YouTube, I mean, is amazingly. There's a lot of sort of quite teasing, and from the market gardeners are on there. Sort of, they give a slight insight of how something works, but not actually showing you how. So, as someone who wants to know how something works, you kind of have to then pay to go on their course or whatever. But YouTube's quite good.
Right. So, any other questions? Or are people cold now?
It has. The sun's gone. But maybe we finish there, and like we can all go away and look on YouTube. And these other sites. But there's this great project called the Teabag Index. I don't know if anyone's come across it, but for soil health, and it's a really simple experiment that was set up for children where you initiated for children where you bury 2 tea bags. One like I think a rooibos tea bag, and one maybe a peppermint tea bag, and the rate, how long it takes them to decompose, or you dig them up again after a certain amount of time, and you look at them, and then you can see like how get a rough gauge about certain things in the soil from that. I don't know what, but it's good to do. It's nice to do. And yes, I want to thank you all very much for coming and for sharing your knowledge and your approach to growing and what you do. And if you'd like to, we're going to have some hop tonic by the film over there, Foreign Pickers, which is a film by artists, My Villages and Company Drinks. And Company Drinks is I'm going to call them a collective, I'm not sure if that's right. It's a company set up by artists, and they pick fruit with different members of the community, and then they produce cordials. And so the hop tonic that we're serving was made as a result of the film that you can see. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.